everybody, welcome back to TFL Podcast. Another fantastic group. I mean, you know, I had Mike French on, and my guest and my pod listeners kind of went into the shitter a little bit, but I'm bringing it right back with this group of guys. Really excited. Obviously, 3 active coaches in the National Lacrosse League right now, but their history in the game is pretty robust. That just means they're old. But at the end of the day, super excited to have head coach and GM of the Philadelphia Wings, Paul Day, long history in the game, and head coach of the Georgia Swarm, Eddie Comeau, and good friend in Saskatchewan in the Western Division, head coach and GM of the Saskatchewan Rush, in Derek Keenan. Welcome to the show, fellas. Excited to have you.
Good to be on. Thanks for having me on, Steve.
Thanks for having us.
Looking forward to it.
Quite a crew.
It's quite a crew, and the history that you guys have as kind of Eastern Ontario lacrosse royalty, if you will, and obviously I love to be on a call with a guy who's won as many NLL championships as Eddie Comeau has, because you know, I mean, I guess Jammer's won a few, and everybody's won more than me, so you know, whatever. But look, super excited to have you guys.
Jammer, must have the most.
He does.
I don't know.
Jammer, you must have the most.
Jammer, how many do you
probably
got?
do.
Who's counting?
We are. Everybody else is counting.
4.
How many is it?
Thinking.
7?
I think it's 9, I think.
Thinking. 9. You're right. 9. Yes.
9. How many is a player?
2.
2
but wow. You could say 2.5 because I was sort of quasi
Toronto
assistant coach in '99 in Toronto. Yeah.
Reg Dunlop.
And so how many is assistant coach in Toronto? Because we could talk about the history of Eddie and Jammer. That's what we call Derek here. Jammer have had a history with the Toronto Rock originally as assistant coaches, and then went their own way. So.
Yeah, so 3.5. Like I said, player coach the 1 year, sort of. That my last year I played, and then 3 as a full assistant coach in Toronto with Eddie and Les. Yeah, good times.
But how'd you do in Anaheim?
We were a solid 5-11. Pretty sure we beat Colorado that year though, and that was.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
well,
that was a good one.
We got beat, didn't we, Paulie, on the charity tour?
We did, yeah. We had the West Coast charity trip, and these guys are talking about their Toronto Rock wins. They're all like the expense of my Rochester Nighthawks.
Yeah,
thanks.
I did have Casey Powell and John Grant on and talked a little bit about that early stage process in the game, and they were certainly bitter about the Toronto Rock. But then I had Doyley and Shooter on, and they had lots to say about their great time with the Toronto Rock. So, obviously this show ultimately has a ton of guys who end up being from Ontario or British Columbia, and I have to broaden my horizons and bring on more guys from the U.S. But anyway, fellas, I want to get to my first question, and just to set the stage, and I ask this of everybody, is Paul Day, who put the stick in your hand for the first time?
I'll be both my 2 older brothers. They both played. My old brother Steve, 4 years older than me, he played junior B, and that was it. But they were both playing, so more than likely it was more a goalie stick, and they were shooting balls at me. So that's how I started to play.
Younger brother. How about you, Eddie?
My dad worked at Westinghouse in Hamilton, and they ran a hockey league, and the guy who ran the hockey league, Bill Buckley, who's in the Ontario Lacrosse Hall of Fame, he started up a lacrosse league, and so a lot of the Westinghouse employees went to that, and so my dad got me into it. My brother and I both started. My dad knew nothing about it, and again, best thing that ever happened to me.
Jammer, how about you?
My cousin Fred Greenwood, first cousin who he was on the 78 Team Canada that won, obviously, the legendary World Championship in field. Quite a bit older than me. I was like 5, I think, when he gave me a stick. But he played for the 60s Gales team. Interesting story with him, though, was Jim Bishop was famous for recruiting athletes, and he never played lacrosse. To you? No, he never played lacrosse in his life, my cousin, and he was the stick boy for a couple of years, and then he started playing and had a great career, played in New West, couple man cups, and so he's the guy I did. So I spent a lot of time with him banging the ball off the wall.
So I don't want to date you guys, but I think it's safe to say that all those sticks that got put in your hands for the first time were wooden sticks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't think there was plastic. I'm pretty sure when I started there was no plastic. I could be wrong, but I don't know.
It probably wasn't invented then. I don't know if plastic itself was invented then.
No.
Look, the question so did you guys ever play without a mask?
I did.
I played my first 4 years no mask. 5 years really, and then my last year junior I put a mask on. Lost a tooth that year and got cut out pretty good, but it was easier to fight that way too, Steve.
I wouldn't know. I was never in a fight in my life.
When I started,
not one that I won anyway.
When I started in Tyke, we didn't wear masks when I started playing, and I remember taking a cut right on the eyebrow with a stick, and then I think when we got to Tyke, we started or like a couple years into Tyke, we started wearing the big football T-bar ones, which were pretty cool, and then in junior I wore a mask all the way through, and then in junior I remember at practice my mask kind of was all screwed up, so I said, I just won't go without a mask for practice. Took 2 sticks in the face. I said, forget that. Put one back on. Yeah, I'm sure Jammer, you started without a mask.
So now you got to ask, like the oldest guy, entire minor lacrosse, no mask at all. Little mouth guard. Yeah. And then junior, we started wearing the football style sort of quarterback mask a little bit. They were pretty good. And then I had the brilliant idea my last year of junior to wear nothing at all. And I think I got cut for about 40 that year. So that was smart.
Yeah. I wore a football face mask in my first year in the mill, and all the guys from the last episode that we were on with the Wings guys that I played with were like, when I showed up with this football face mask, they just didn't know what to think, right? Like a bunch of American guys that are used to wearing a field bucket and, the strings that you tighten up. And I showed up to camp wearing a football mask, and I think I scared a bunch of guys. So, they figured they'd keep me on the team because I must have been crazy. But, anyway.
I think most of the guys that wore those football masks too, because they were so heavy. I'm sure if I asked every one of you guys all probably have a scar right across here from your helmets coming down. And the Peterborough guys were smart. They were the first guys who started peeling the rubber off the football mask to make it lighter. Because everyone had cuts across their nose just because the helmet was so heavy. It would come down. And
not too often that someone says the Peterborough guys were smart.
You're right about that.
That's for sure.
The best thing about Peterborough guys is they're really good at all of the bar games. Like they beat you in darts, they beat you in pool, they beat you at any game that you play in a bar. Peterborough guys will beat you at.
Yeah, not me, Steve. I left when I was 19, so Eddie will tell you. Yeah, I'm not very good at any of those games.
That's clean living, right?
You can't take the burrow out of the guy, though. Let's be honest here.
That's correct.
I had a player who used to say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to the gym." And I say, "Hey, when did Peterborough get a bar named Jim's?"
Hey, Jammer, I got a question for you. How good was Joe Nieuwendyk at lacrosse?
He was, and we all know how good Gary and Paul were. He was as good or better. Like they were I think he's a year older than Gary and Paul. And of course he stopped playing, I think, when he was 19. That was his last year. He was as good or better than those two. So he was unbelievable. Really good.
Steve, we played them in Whitby. Like he's 2 or 3 years older than me. We lost 15-9, and he had 14 points. That he could run.
He was really good.
He was unbelievable.
I played against him too, even though he's 6 years younger. I played against him in my last year junior. He played a year I played a year against him. So yeah, he was real good.
For those of our listeners out there that just kind of coming to the TFL podcast for the first time and don't know, Joe Nieuwendyk, a member of I think, is he in the National Hockey League Hall of Fame yet?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, he is.
A member of the National Hockey League Hall of Fame is Derek Keenan's brother-in-law, right?
Yeah, correct.
So, so a great lacrosse player in his time. There's probably a ton of guys that people talk about that played lacrosse in their youth before they went on to great hockey careers, and he's certainly at the forefront of that. And Adam Oates, I know.
Adam Oates is a year younger than me. He was incredible too. Like, just really, really good, really talented, skilled, athletic, real good player.
Another connection there. Adam Oates' brother-in-law is Mike Poulin.
Oh, no kidding.
Pooley's sister married Oatesy, and so we were out we played in New England one time. They live at the time they were living in Jersey, and he came out to the game and came to shoot around, and hadn't had a stick in his hand for a lot of years, so was out shooting on Pooley, and of course Pooley was terrible that night, so he said, I don't want him coming anymore. I get too nervous having a Hall of Fame hockey guy watching me play.
I've had the really cool experience to in the last few weeks had some interactions with Wayne Gretzky and to hear him talk about his passion and affinity for the game of box lacrosse is pretty empowering for us. But knowing that we kind of have a history of people. I mean, look, Paul, you know the head coach of the Anaheim Ducks pretty well, who was a San Diego Gulls head coach here in the last couple of years. So yeah, the connection between early hockey and lacrosse for most Canadians, right, was we played a lot of lacrosse in the summer, and then they put the ice in, and we played a lot of hockey. So that was our transition. We're multi-sport athletes in the same arena.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, growing up in Peterborough, we played almost the 10 to 12 guys were on the same hockey team, minor hockey and minor lacrosse all the way through. So sometimes even had the same coach.
Cali BBQ is proud to be an official sponsor of your San Diego Seals. Buy our slow smoked barbecue at any Seals home game or online anytime at www.calibbq.media.
Well, hey, let's transition a little bit to the major indoor lacrosse league, which all of you guys had a hand in kind of being pioneers in that league, and then on to the National Lacrosse League. But Eddie, talk about the first time you walked into a pro locker room and what your kind of first thoughts were.
Well, I'll go back a little before that. First time I saw a game was we went down with a bunch of guys from university on spring break down to North Carolina, to NC State, to play some games. And on the way back, we went to watch a Eagle Pro box lacrosse game in Baltimore. And we were watching this game. I remember we had with Ross Cowie there, and we were watching the game, and we were saying, Ross, you got to get out there. These goalies are terrible, right? Because they were American guys that didn't know how to play box at the time, but it was great. There was thousands of people at this game, and it was awesome to be part of. And for me to I started out with a lot of the guys I played with in senior lacrosse. Ended up playing with the Bandits, Bob Hamley, and a bunch of guys. So I had season tickets. I went to the games, and I was lucky enough to get to. You remember back in the ESPN 2 days, the Deuce, they would be doing the games, and I got Tommy Howe and Keith McLeod ended up working for them, and I got pulled in. So these guys were getting paid $100 to play in the games, and I was getting paid $50 to be a spotter up for ESPN2. So it was a good gig. I had a lot of fun doing that.
So you got a career for you after coaching is over.
I was good. The best part was watching your name or watching, you would give them some obscure stat like, Philadelphia hasn't had a loose ball in 16 minutes. And then, 5 seconds later, that would show up on the screen. It was a lot of fun. And I left with $50 cash. So it was a pretty good deal.
Where'd you spend that, Eddie?
Look Club, baby. Look Club.
Yeah, you need more than us, probably.
Paulie Day, how about you? First time you walked in to a pro locker room?
Oh, yeah. Well, Jammer's on the team, so it's basically the NL Hall of Fame, Jimmy Veltman, Jammer, Kevin Alexander, John Tavares. We were the same age, but it was like a who's who. Darius Kilgore, guys that I played against. And it was probably in Welland. I don't even remember where it was. We went to these tennis bubbles, but the one I was at police college, so I was at the academy, and I had to drive from London. I don't know if you remember this, Jammer. Sometimes we practice in Buffalo, sometimes Canada, sometimes Rochester. So I drive from London, Ontario on a Tuesday night. Got to be up at 6 a.m. to march. No gas pay. Just drive by myself, probably 5 hours to Rochester. Get to the convention or the county fairgrounds. Pretty cool looking place. We come out, no seats or anything, boards are up. Start practicing, run around. We start shooting on the goalies. Someone hits the boards, and all the boards fall down. So practice is over. Like in the
I was there.
Yep. And then we got to drive home another 6 hours. It's like a 10 to 12 hour drive day. Yeah, we didn't get gas money back then. So yeah, it was.
Hence the start of the PLPA.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. And that group was like, we lost our first 3 games because we didn't understand the rules. Once we got the rules down, there were no rules, and then we rolled.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you walked into a locker room, right around the same time. But what were your impressions of that whole
time? But I was.
I'm playing pro sports. What was that like?
I was 31 years old though, so it was a little different for me, and it was quite a group, like Paul said, and of course, Johnny Meridian was a GM, so everything was fantastic. Everything was wonderful, and everything was going to be great, and we had all these follies that went on, and like Paul said, we lost our first 3, but I knew we had a tremendous group of guys, like just, and real talented group of players. And the funniest part about that season is, it goes down as a championship for the Buffalo Bandits. But, of course, back then it was the MILL. There was no franchises. The team was owned and operated by Russ Klein and Chris Fritz. And as the season went on, like we started 0-3, there was only 8 games, but we were getting 16,000 plus at the old odd in Buffalo. And they managed to finagle the playoff format so that we got into the playoffs, because back then it was basically the top 2 teams played for the championship. There was no other playoffs, so we got in so we could get a home game, and ended up winning. And then I think we went undefeated the next year too and won 2 in a row. But it was pretty funny. It was the same story from Detroit. They just changed the format so that we're in, and we're like, oh, this is great because we know we're going to win. We're pretty good. But it was pretty funny.
Eddie, what was your pathway to coaching in the National Lacrosse League? Talk about that. And I know you have an illustrious career coaching college lacrosse and collegiate lacrosse in Canada, but how do you get to be, an NLL coach?
Well, I think for me, it really, like a lot of people, it comes down to, the path you choose and some connections you make along the way. And the coaching at McMaster in Hamilton for all those years, our arch nemesis was down the highway, Brock University in St. Catharines, and Johnny Meridian was coaching that team. So I got to know Johnny through the university league, and when the and I was coaching some minor lacrosse and some junior lacrosse at the time, and then when and I always knew that was going to be my path. My career was kind of winding down playing. And but when they first started up with the NLL in Hamilton before the first year of the Ontario Raiders, before the team moved to Toronto, I had called Gypsy and kind of said, hey Johnny, I'm here and I'm a local guy, and so I always tell people I owe Johnny my career in lacrosse, because and I think for most of us it was our connections and our our resumes does one thing, but your connections get you in the door. So Johnny Meridian helped me get started that first year, and I didn't really know Les at all, and obviously got a chance to work with Les and became great friends with him and learned a lot, and got a chance to work with Derek as well in Toronto and with Paul and with you. So
The good news is Johnny probably owes you money, so you got him back at some point.
Yeah, there you go. True. Sorry, Johnny. Not sorry.
How about you guys? Like obviously playing is that pathway, but what's the pathway for you, Paul, to become a coach in the NFL?
You know, I played in Buffalo the 1 year. I went back to the other 2 camps. I was pretty young, and I did play senior across that in the summers. I played 90 in Vancouver, and then got hired with the police. So you get a lot of time off to play. There wasn't any teams around St. Catharines, so I started coaching the junior A's in St. Catharines when I was 24. I think I coached them in 94, 95, 96. And then again, Rochester got a team in the fall of 94, so it was after my first year in junior A, I was 25 maybe. And again, Gypsy, Johnny called and said, hey, you should apply for this job. So I applied and spent the next 11 years there, and then ended up back there. So yeah, it was Gypsy called. I interviewed with him, and I can't remember Chris or Russ. I can't remember, one of them in Buffalo, where we used to practice in Buffalo, Jammer.
I want to know, tell me who's the GOAT in our game? John Tavares, Gary Gait. Come on.
I'll let you start, Eddie.
I got asked this not too long ago, and I said I said John Tavares just because of longevity. But I mean, I think for someone who's been the most influential and instrumental in our game, I mean, it would be Gary. Just what he's done in men's lacrosse, what he's done in women's lacrosse, what he's done in equipment, like all those, like he's been, that part of it for sure. But I think as a player, I mean, JT played 25 years of pro lacrosse. And then, by the way, I remember someone saying to me when he was like 44 and we beat them in a game, and they said, oh, he's looking old. I said, he scored 53 goals this season. I said, I think he's still doing pretty good. So I think, that's why I would say Tavares.
Jammer?
Yeah, that's a really tough call, but others have asked me that, including my son, and I would go with JT for many reasons. And believe me, Gator, to me, like, what an athlete. Gary and Paul, like, tremendous athletes, kind of, and played in an era too. Both did. Johnny and those guys played where you actually at one time had to play both ends of the floor, and all three were good at it. But JT just always evolved his game. Like, just, when he was a young guy with us in 92 and 93 in Buffalo, he was an inside guy, off-ball guy, and not really a one-on-one or outside shooter. And he evolved his game continually. When he got older, he developed a tremendous perimeter shot. Like, he could just catch it and shoot it and pick a corner like nobody else. And just continually evolved his game, always stayed fit. I think he's in my mind the best.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. JT, I mean, he could do it all. It's funny, late in the game though, I had Paulie Gate in Rochester, and I mean, there'd be games he'd be sitting there on the bench with like blood running down his face. He wouldn't say anything. He'd just go out and, like, if there was one guy with the ball at the end of the game I'd want, it'd be Paulie. Gary could take over a whole game, but I think JT's, he did it all. And even Jammer late in his career, he became such a great passer too. And
yeah,
24, 25 years. I'd say in the NLL, it would be JT, but it's maybe overall with the MLL and the NLL, it would be Gary.
Well,
right on.
It's just another example of bullshit Eastern biased. One more time, a Western guy gets the short end of the stick, even though he may be the greatest player in the game. It's just the Eastern guys band together. They probably called each other before the show started and said, he's going to ask this question, and we're going to say this because there's this massive Eastern bias. It's really
hey, it wasn't on the agenda. What are you talking about? We didn't call each other.
Hey, speaking on behalf of the other guys, the only thing I'm shocked with, Steve, is that you didn't include your name in those other two guys.
Well, I mean,
Hey, if you were to ask me who the greatest finisher was of all time,
oh, thank you so much.
who would that be?
Are you really going to put me in that list? That's so fantastic. Thank you. Okay, fellas, that's a wrap. This has been a great show.
Just so for our Western friends, the greatest finisher of all time, Kevin Alexander, not even close.
Yeah, well, that's true. And he
Not
took
even
faceoffs too. Took faceoffs too.
Yeah, not even close. Never missed.
We were chatting earlier before we went on record on this, and we were talking about the 2007 World Games in Halifax, and I was being accused of playing golf every day. But really, Kevin, I never played golf in Halifax. It was too damn cold. But Kevin Alexander took his golf clubs to Manchester, England in 1994, and I was a starting attackman in that team, and Eddie, you can attest to this. I never saw him or Stu Aird the entire trip, except for games when they showed up. They weren't even on the team bus.
Yep, I remember it well, and he got hurt too, which I think hampered his golf game a little bit.
It did, killed his golf game. We ended up finishing third. It's like the only time in the history of the World Games that Canada has finished third. So I have that to put on my resume. But anyway, I'm going to change gears a little bit because we've all been general managers in this league together, and I want to know who the president of the Liars Club is in the National Lacrosse League.
The old Liars.
Who's the best at the Liars Club? They don't want to say anything.
Is it the host?
Active.
Is it the host?
Not the host.
What's that?
I think
the host.
There's a difference between a liar and a bullshitter.
What's the difference?
Well, you're a pretty good bullshitter, but at the end of the day, I can usually get the truth out of you. I'll start, and I love him, but I say Bob Hamley had to be up there. He was pretty good.
Has to be.
Number one. Yeah.
Like both just look at you and tell you something that just never panned out. Yeah, Hammer is pretty good.
I think there's probably a tie for everyone in the league in first place in that. Everyone's pretty good at that, but I think Kurt Malosky in current day is a guy who sometimes hard to get a straight answer out, and he'll call you up and ask for one of your players, and he'll offer you some guy who's on their practice roster, right? And it's just so sometimes the Liars Club is guys that also embellish the value of what they have, and there's a few guys who do that. So
I love the fact that all of you guys, like, you would go into a call, it didn't matter who it was with, and Bob Hamley was good at it, but it was like you were going in with a loaf of bread to try and get a T-bone steak, and and I'm like, just because this was Bob McMahon was the best at this. Slip was the best at explaining this. But he said, just because you have a pile of shit doesn't mean that if you give me more shit, it doesn't make it a bigger pile of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, Bob Hamley was the best because when he ultimately came to work for me, I started to see his strategy in the approaches that he would make when he was going out to make a deal. And I would just shake my head because I'd probably been on the other end of that conversation about 30 times. So it was good. Talk about the 2005 NLL All-Star game in Calgary.
Oh, Eddie. So I think it was supposed to be Darius Kilgore might have been the smartest guy that year because he was supposed to be the assistant. And me and Eddie are in Rochester, and I'm like, Darius, I can't make it. So I'm like, okay, well, hey, Jim Jennings, you mind if Eddie comes with me? Eddie and I'll go. And
Jim Jennings was the commissioner at the time, right?
Yeah. And we get the news, hey, we're playing in Toronto. Philly and Buffalo are playing. All four Eastern teams are meeting at the private hangar, like where the Raptors and the Leafs are going to – they take their private planes.
And it was an NBC game. That was the NBC season. So they didn't want to risk us flying out on commercial airline in the morning because they said, oh, no, we can't, we've paid a lot of money to be on NBC. So, yeah, they charter this plane. So, as Paul said, we meet at the Raptors, at the private airstrip, just at Pearson Airport in Toronto, and got a little bit of a shock when we got there.
Yeah, we were excited. Like, everybody's having some beers and some snacks, and then waiting for the other teams to get there, and we come outside. We're expecting, they said, a private jet. We come out, it's a Dash 7 from like 1958 with the propellers, and we're going to Calgary. So we stopped. Yeah, it was like the plane from Major League. We stopped. The heat doesn't work. Dallas Elliott and John Tavares have got the pillows over their heads for the heat. Everybody's bundled up. The equipment's in there. We stop in Winnipeg to fuel up. I get off the plane. I go right to the phone.
Place on the planet.
I went and called WestJet. Got me and Eddie 2 return flights because not only that, they were flying home on the plane right after the game. So then we land in Calgary, and it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. Game's at noon. Doc Emmerich doing it on NBC. And I looked at the pilot. I go, I could have been in Europe by now.
I said to Paul, when we landed in Winnipeg, I said to Paul, because there was no lights on the lights didn't work on the plane either, so it was pitch black, and we're flying, and I can't sleep on planes, so I'm like looking at all these small towns. We're only flying, I think, at like 15,000 feet in the air. I can't even see my watch. I'm trying to look at my watch, and I'm thinking, well, geez, it looks like it's almost like we left at 1. It looks like it's almost 6 o'clock. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe we didn't have to fuel in Winnipeg. And then the guy comes on and says, hey, we're just starting our descent into Winnipeg. And so we're freezing on the plane. And I said to Paul, I said, I'm going to say something I never thought I would say in the middle of winter. I'm going to go outside to get warmed up in Winnipeg. It was warmer outside than it was in the plane. And then when we finally get to Calgary, they come out right on the tarmac. They pick us up. We go to the hotel, and I'll never forget, Paul, we're going to the hotel. Jim Jennings is there apologizing to us. Brad Waters, who was the owner of the Rock Den, flew out commercial that morning from Toronto. He was there before we were. And we're like literally going into the airport or going into the hotel to get to our rooms because most of us hadn't slept or tried to sleep on a plane, and they had the luggage at the back of the plane, so guys were actually were sleeping on top of the equipment bags in the cabin at the back of the plane. And we as we're going into the hotel, the Western team is leaving to go to the rink. And Paul, I remember Paul saying to the guy, like, hey buddy, we're going to sleep. We'll get there for game time. And that's pretty much what we did. We got there for game time.
It was it was a great game though.
It was.
It went to overtime. It was an unbelievable game. It was a great showcase on NBC, for lacrosse. Doc Emmerich doing the game was, it was a super cool event.
Well, and it was funny at the beginning of the game, they said, hey, it's NBC. We've got 2 hours. We got to keep this to 2 hours. So they were praying not to have overtime, but the refs came to us and said, hey, look, we don't want to call any penalties. So, it's kind of honor system on the bench. We want to, we want you guys to be on the honor system, but we're not going to call any too many men penalties. So I tell the guy working our door, who I think was the Calgary guy, I said, hey buddy, let's be honest with this. We'll play it straight up and everything's good. So opening face-off, we win the face-off. We go down, we take a shot. They make a save. I see the goalie passing the ball, and this ball is heading towards our net. And I'm thinking to myself, who the hell is that ball going to? And there's Dan Dawson standing at our restraining line, catches the ball, goes in 1-0. So I turned to the guy on Calgary on the bench. I said, I remember what I said, forget it. So it was a free-for-all. But it was a great game. It was probably there might have been another one after that was a good all-star game. But, that was a quality game. It was real lacrosse. It wasn't one of these, slap and tickle 25, 24 games where no one played defense. It was real game. JT scored in overtime.
The 0-4 game in Denver was fun. That's the game that the game J. Jalbert hits Glenn Clark, but I've talked about that ad nauseum with some other guys. But One of my favorite All-Star moments in the National Lacrosse League was 2009. We hosted it again in Denver, and Dan Dawson comes to me and he says, "Hey, if I score, can I go jump in the hot tub?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So he scores, and all these celebrations were happening. And as you guys know, Mark Steenhuis was the greatest all-star player in the history of our league. He would score like 10 goals all the time. So Dan Dawson scores a goal, and he leaves. He runs out the Zamboni entrance, and he disappears. And the next thing you know, he comes out at the hot tub we had in Denver with the models, and he jumps in with all his gear on. And he sat in the hot tub for the fourth quarter watching the game with all the models. It was classic. It was an absolute classic story.
A quick break. This episode is sponsored by Manscaped.com. Manscaped is the only men's brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming and hygiene. If you've been listening to our channel for a while, you know that we are big fans of Manscaped and their Perfect Package Essentials Kit, which is the world's finest all-in-one manscaping kit that makes manscaping safe and easy. And just when you think they've got it all figured out, they take it to the next level. I'm excited to be one of the first to confirm that after 18-plus months of research and development, the new Lawnmower 3.0 waterproof body trimmer has just been released and comes with a ton of new upgrades. Get 20% off plus free shipping from your Perfect Package 3.0 purchase when you use promo code SEALS20 at manscaped.com. That's code SEALS20 for 20% off at manscaped.com. Now, back to the pod.
So, Jammer, you've been around the league for a while. You've been in a number of teams in Portland and Anaheim and Edmonton and Saskatchewan, like Toronto. Like, give me your best travel story in the NLL.
I could give you a gazillion bad ones, so I'm going to give you because there are many. A couple good ones. Albany, 2000, and Eddie, you might have to correct me on this one. 2002 or 3 championship when we chartered to Albany for the
2002.
Game. Yeah, 2002. They chartered. There was a big kerfuffle about who should be hosting in the game, and that they obviously finished in first, so they should be hosting it. But our ownership thought that wasn't right. But at any rate, we chartered there, and then chartered back because it was charter flight, only 25 staff or like total, and but we had fans on the plane, and by the time we got on the plane, they weren't very sober. And it was quite a flight home. But the other one, Steve, and you'll remember this, and this is another charter situation, and this is, again, classic NLL where, it's commercial flights and, you plan as best you can. And I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago when we had a back-to-back in Colorado in early April of all things. Like, you think weather's pretty good. Huge snowstorm rolls into Denver, and we're not getting out. And we have to play in Saskatchewan the next night. And we got a taste of what it's like in other pro leagues where we got a charter, both teams. We get on the plane together. And the best part is we got there before you were in Colorado at the time. We got there at the airport before you guys. And, I'm trying to be humble and, and be the good guy. And I'm like, well, so, and it's like on a charter, I've not been on very many. I think I've been on 2 or 3. You don't go through customs. You don't go through security. You get out of a bus and you get on the plane. So we walk on and we're there first. And I turned around to my owner, Bruce Urban, and I said, Bruce, like, I don't know what to do here. Do we sit at the front of the plane or do we go to the back? He says, we won. We sit at the front. I said, sounds good to me. He walked down right in the front row. Sounds good.
Yeah, you could probably – I don't know that it doesn't happen in certainly a lot of other leagues, obviously, where you literally played on the night before against the team, and then we all got on the plane and then sat together on the plane, flew up to to our destination and did that. Yeah. It doesn't happen very often. I woke up that morning and said, after we lost, and I said, I'm not going on this trip. I didn't bother to go. So I think we ended up beating you the next night. So.
Hey, Steve, we had back in the day, we stayed at some nice hotels in the day, but back in the early days of the league, it's pretty wild and a lot of fun and a lot of craziness. And I'll never forget, and I won't say the name of the place, but you guys all know it. And I think I sent a couple of you a picture of it this year when we were back on Long Island when we played in New York. We pull up to the establishment, and we are like shocked, at what this place looks like. And I'll never forget, Derek gets off the bus and he says, well, look on the bright side, guys. There's no way we can get thrown out of this place.
Yeah.
And believe me, we tried.
That was back in the day when that happened a lot.
Well, you remember the hotel in St. Paul, Minnesota, called it was like the Kelly Inn or something like that. And
oh yeah,
that was a beauty. There's been a few beauties along the way that we've stayed in, but we've lived with it, but whatever. So throughout kind of your careers in the National Lacrosse League, who's the most underrated player you guys have ever encountered? Whether you coached him or he was on another team, who's the most underrated guy?
For me, I would say right now, the last 4 or 5 years, Shane Jackson.
Yeah.
He is, he's unbelievable. And, I got more credit last year, this year, but he is, he's one of the most underrated guys, I'd say.
So do you think we can get him for a loaf of bread?
Yeah. Gotta ask him.
Throw in a T-bone. Nice, Steve.
T-bone and a loaf of bread. How about you, Eddie? Who do you think most underrated guy?
I'll go back some years, and Paulie used to always talk about this guy in Rochester, but and I'm going to pick two guys, but one was Jeremy Hollenbeck, such a great player, and those are when I think of underrated guys, I often think of the guys who just go out there and do their job and work hard and are quiet and can be relied on. And the other guy who got some notoriety in his career, but I had him in three places and tried everywhere else I was to get with Sandy Chapman. And I love Chappie, and Chappie worked hard, never questioned anything you asked him to do. And, he ended up winning a Defensive Player of the Year the one year, but prior to that, he was pretty under the radar. But when you'd ask a guy like John Grant who he hated to play against, he'd say, I hate playing against Chappie because he's, I can't shake him. So those are two guys that I always think of when I think underrated players.
I would say for me, probably Curtis Knight. Coached him a long time in junior and the pro level, and just kind of a do everything kind of guy, do whatever you ask him to do and play different roles if needed, and competitor, small guy, but plays big. I would say Curtis would be the guy that comes to mind for me first.
And once again, all Eastern guys. So,
right.
Whatever. It just continues.
Several with you guys.
I'm gonna say a name, fellas, and I just want your reactions to this name, and I got a list of guys, and certainly guys that we have a lot of respect for. I know his coaches. I'll start with some guys that we know well that are not with us anymore. Les Bartley.
Communicator.
I would say a mentor and legacy. When you look at the number of people, we were talking about that not too long ago, the number of people that Les is, it's like the Bill Walsh tree in NFL football. When you look at all the people that worked under Bill Walsh and that are, and then under Bill Belichick that are in the league, Les had that same impact.
Prepared and innovative for me. Always prepared, always had new ideas. Unbelievable guy to work around, to be around.
How about Dave Huntley?
Hunt's, I saw Hunt's as a visionary. He said things to me about players, about things in our game that were like it happened years later. And one quick example, for the 2006 World Lacrosse Championships, when I was on the coaching staff for the field team, he sent an email out after Team USA named their team. He sent an email out telling us why we were going to win. And he went through their whole roster and said why we're better than them. And he analyzed it. And this was months before we played. And I remember after we won, and I don't think a lot of people believed that we were going to win, including some people on our team. And he really believed it and saw the vision. And I remember afterwards we won. I asked him if he could help me with the lottery numbers, but he couldn't help me with that.
Paulie Day, Dave Huntley.
Oh, just gentleman, great sense of humor. Always kind of made you feel special as being a lacrosse guy around him. Like he was the man in the room. Whether it was the old MILL now or you're at a Heritage Cup game or you're around Team Canada, he just made everybody feel great. I don't know if that's like what a great man.
I think passion and care for the game, especially the Canadian game. I was fortunate to sit on a committee with him not long before he had unfortunately passed away, and it was really good to be in the room with him. So, just a lot of passion for the game.
I have many, many, many Dave Huntley stories. There's probably two. One, interestingly enough, Eddie, you talk about innovation. And I think if you talk to Paul Rabel right now about the Premier Lacrosse League and what they're doing now, that was Hunt's idea, is to go on tour. And I know Paul Rabel actually gives him credit for that. And the concept of a tour was always in the back of Dave Huntley's mind. And Eddie, you and I had many conversations with him about that and about the concept. And that was one of his hallmarks was talking about a touring model. And you know what? Kudos to Paul Rabel and Mike Rabel, who picked that cause up and have figured out a way to kind of get that done. Good for them. The other one is the 2014 World Games in 2014 World Games in Denver, and we had a barbecue dinner before that at our doctor's house, Phil Stull, and the leftovers were sitting there, and everybody's in a dorm, and nobody can take the leftover food with them. And Hunch grabs the leftovers, which are in like this aluminum chafing disc, and he holds them over his head with the barbecue, and he goes, "The road to gold begins with aluminum." One of my favorite stories. So how about Tony Resch, American coach? I know you guys all have interacted with Tony and have watched him work, and I certainly got to play for him for the Philadelphia Wings. And Paul, you're now the head coach, and his legacy, I think, lives on in Philly. Talk about Tony Resch.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we go back to underrated. We can talk about underrated coaches in this league. Like me and Derek played against him when he was in Philly. Great player, big, strong, passionate guy about the game. And, as one of the first coaches with the Wings, very professional guy, very professional college-like coach. And, I talk to him still today in Philly. And, we made sure as a group we've tried to keep the history and the legacy that he built, Hunt's built, Mike French. That's every training camp we talk about it all the time, and that's because of Tony and Hunt's and guys before him.
Thanks. I'm still waiting for my check.
I would say intense for Tony. I thought he just always looked like he was like fiery, intense, but in control, like not, screaming and yelling, just intense. And you know what? I disappointed. I know career-wise he had stuff going on, but he's a guy that, probably should be coaching in our league still, and there's room for guys like that. I do remember the one funny story at a certain draft in Buffalo where his head coach and a certain GM got up and left early because they had a flight. Tony had to get back to teach the next morning, so they had to catch a flight and turned around and left their list with the table behind them and said, "Pick these guys in this order."
to be fair, we got all those guys because they were available. Nobody else was going to take them, and we had to catch a flight. What are your thoughts on Tony Rush?
I still hear from Tony on occasion. What a great guy. I have to say, I played against him for a couple of years when he was in Philly, and he was a beast. And it was kind of when we weren't playing any OD at all then. Well, maybe Kevy didn't play a lot of defense, a little bit. but there was really not a lot of OD. So, we had to match up against certain guys, and I didn't see him a lot matching up against me when he was on offense. But when I went down to play offense, he was always on me, and he was tough. He was hard to play against. And as a coach, I thought the innovation that he made from the players and the talent that he got, mostly American players, was incredible. He did a great job with those guys, and managed to I think evolve sort of the field game into the indoor game, and integrate the two with better than probably anybody has.
You guys were, at least I think there was a couple of you guys that were on the staff in the 2002 Heritage Cup where he was the head coach, and that was a shocking result, to say the least, for the Canadian side. So Tony was a head coach. Look, I played with the guy, or played for the guy. He was my first coach in the Mill, and how he ever tolerated me as a player, I'll never understand. But I certainly appreciate Tony Rush significantly. I mean, the guy's won at every level. He's won everywhere he's gone. Every team he goes to, they win, and he's now coaching the PLL. And wish he was still in the NLL. I think he's one of the only American coaches in the Hall of Fame in the NLL. So pretty interesting. Kevin Dance. Do you remember Kevin Dance?
Of course.
Buddy.
Steve Toll is what comes to mind with Kevin Dance. Toll him up one time. That's all I can think of.
Yeah. Ragdolled him, didn't he?
Toller didn't fight a lot, and if he did, he didn't do very well, and he beat him up. Remember, Eddie?
Oh,
I remember
Yeah.
Dance getting ragdolled, no teeth and all. All
Yeah,
over
that
the field.
Maple Leaf Gardens, the '99 championship, and we were down 2-3, and Dancer thought he'd try and stir stuff up, and then he got beat up. I'm like, oh boy! But Dancer competitor, hey, Eddie, he was a competitor, and at one time, I think he was Junior A Player of the Year the one time, but competitor, and he might have been, he was the Kenny Linsman of lacrosse back then.
Brad Marchant of these days, right? Smallish, but effective. But yeah, it got, probably one of those guys that, if you played with him, you'd say, oh, great teammate. But when you coached or played against him, you wanted to, well, I was going to say you wanted to knock his teeth in, but he didn't have any teeth. So it didn't
have any teeth. My favorite Kevin Dance story is a 1994 game against Detroit, and you guys weren't involved, but you probably all remember that game that ended in the third quarter in a significant brawl, and they called the game. But Kevin Dance got cross-checked by Tom Marechek right in the face. And Kevin Dance didn't like it very much, and he started going after Tommy Marechek. And Tommy Marechek, Kevin Dance didn't have any teeth. And Tommy Marechek kept going, "Smile, Kevin, smile." And that's what started the whole thing, and all hell broke loose. And it was, it was utter and absolute anarchy and chaos in that game. So that's the Kevin Dance story. Talk about Bob Watson. I know he was instrumental in a lot of wins on the Toronto side, and Paulie on the Rochester side wasn't the most popular guy in the world.
Oh man, he was one of the best, boys? I played with him in '97. Went to him in '97. Man, he was a good goalie.
He was, for me, he was just he was great to coach, because we would say, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing. So yeah, whatever, Eddie, just let me know. Let me know. No big. He just didn't. He was so easygoing, but he was so clutch.
Mm-hmm.
When the games were on the line, he was just spectacular. And that, I know we got a lot of great goalies in the league now, but I still don't think anyone is good and as clutch as what Bob was.
For me, because back in those days I coached the defense in Toronto, he was a normal guy. And as we know, goalies can be quirky. Like goalies can be very, very quirky, and we've all had all of them. And he was just a normal dude. Like he never got rattled. He never ever finger pointed. The old, shrug the shoulders and what's going on. He never ever did that. The only time he ever, and Eddie, you'll remember this story really well, when I talked to Bob a lot because I was with the defense most of the time, and we were watching film and talking about defenders on other teams, and I think we were playing Washington or Baltimore. I think Washington, and they were talking about their transition game, and I said, Bob, listen, guys like Brian Reese and Donovan, when they come down, they're going to blast it hard and low every freaking time. So just drop to your knees, because they're not going to shoot anywhere else. So we're playing actually in Toronto at the Air Canada Center, and Brian Reese runs down and fires one right over his shoulder. Well, he looked over me at the bench with the worst glare I've ever. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Bob. Threw one right in the top corner. I'm like, oh, my bad.
Quality coaching.
The analytics on that were in my favor, but I feel.
Yeah. When we used to practice, we'd ask one of the things we did with guys, we'd ask guys, what they liked about practice, and guys would say, I like the camaraderie, I like the competition, I like the opportunity to get better and to learn. And so we get to whip and we say, so Bob, what do you like about practice? He said, I like the pizza. He said, I like the pizza after practice. He said, this one, direct quote, you think I like getting hit with 1,000 balls?
John Grant Jr. I know, Paulie. He was a staple in Rochester and was a player that you had to spend a lot of time coaching. I know Eddie did the same when he was with Rochester. But talk about John Grant Jr.
Yeah, he grew up on my street, like 7 doors down. So 7-8 doors down, and he's 7 or 8 years younger than me. So in junior, I'd leave the rink after playing, and him and Tracy Kluski would be on the floor in Peterborough at the Mem Center shooting balls till like midnight. And obviously, I guess I started with junior Rochester, and Rochester dropped him, and then ended up he came back to Peterborough playing in 2016. And just the maturity level from all the way through, it's, intense, hard on himself, unbelievable. And, one of the greatest, he's in that conversation for the greatest ever player.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, people talk about best player, best this. I think he's the best all around player with his stick in the game, and just the things he did. And he never really got credit for his passing. But I remember the first practice with Paulie down in Rochester and Tonawanda. Being a kind of a wise ass, the junior runs down and he takes a reverse backhand, like a around the world or whatever they call it these days, and he throws it, and it goes short side. And I'm just being a dick. I said, "Hey, junior, I didn't hear you call that." And he said, "Oh, okay. The next one will be off the pipe and in far side." Sure enough, he goes down, catches the ball around the back, off the pipe and in. And I was like, okay, I got to shut up. He was that good, and continues to, you watch his videos and you see what he does. He's better than probably most of the guys playing now still.
Coach, he's a coach. Johns Hopkins.
As a I only got to coach John in Prague in 2011 in Team Canada. It's the only time. Other than that, I've always been an opponent, and to me, scary. You knew whenever the ball was in his stick, anything could happen, and you just didn't know what it was. So he was just a scary guy with the ball in his stick. Could do anything.
Yeah, still is. Still is. Hey, I stood in front of him one time with a water bottle on my head and let him shoot at my head, but he might be the only guy I'd let do that. Because if it was me on the other side of that, there's no way I would let me shoot at anybody's head. That would be bad.
Who would?
I know, right? Jimmy Veltman.
I would say
leader.
Yeah, I think that's the word for me too. And
I'm sorry, but leader.
He wasn't always the most vocal guy, but him and Terry Bullen I used to call, and you guys are old enough, you would know the commercial. I used to say they were like E.F. Hutton. You remember those old commercials on TV when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen, and that was it with Jimmy. And Jimmy just come in at the room, and he played so hard every shift and did everything for the team. And just great leader.
If you created a Mount Rushmore of lacrosse, indoor lacrosse, box lacrosse, MILL, National Lacrosse League, Jimmy Veltman's on the Mount Rushmore, is he not?
I think so, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would. I mean, that's my Mount Rushmore, and I think he would be up there with a lot of people, and probably a guy that in the current day and age of as our game evolves and new fans and all that fun stuff, he may tend to be forgotten a little bit in the process because the conversation revolves around JT and Gary and Paul and Junior and Casey and a number of those guys. But I think Jimmy Veltman probably deserves to be in the pantheon of the greatest players that's ever played our game. So,
well, he was just a guy. You know what? Ask him to do it, whatever it was, and he could do it. Like, you want to play offense tonight, all night? Yeah, sure. You want to play both ends? Sure. If you want to play out the back door and maybe, power play, man down, the whole 9 yards, he could do everything. And that's not many guys like that.
And I've told a few people this story, the one championship in Toronto at Maple Leaf Gardens. He had a penalty, comes out of the penalty box, ends up on a breakaway, goes in, doesn't score, and the guy kind of dives at him and kind of rolls up on his leg, and he comes to the bench, and it looks like he's crouching down. I thought it was his shoulder. So our trainer or athletic therapist, Dave Murray, I say, Dave, see, you better go check on V. And so beside our bench, there were no seats at that time, so we had like a little table there. So he's got Jimmy up on the table, and he's looking at his foot, and Dave was really, really worried. He said, I don't know, Jimmy, I think it's broken. We should probably go get an x-ray. And I will never forget, I'm listening. I'm not looking, I'm just listening. Jimmy says, what's the difference if I get an x-ray now or get an x-ray after the game? Tape it up and let's go. And he goes back out there. We win. He goes to the post-game party with us all. And then the next morning he shows up to our brunch on crutches. So that it shows, what a leader he was. And again, like you say, people have forgotten about him, but people that played with him or coached him certainly haven't.
No.
Another quick break. Coronado Brewing Company is proud to be the official craft beer partner of the Seals. Enjoy fan favorite Orange Avenue Wit and their new Salty Crew Blonde Ale all season long, and visit coronadobrewing.com to find their award-winning beers near you. Stay coastal. Cheers.
Okay, so I want to get back to having a little fun. Who would play the other guys in a movie? So, Eddie, who plays Jammer? Who plays Paul Day?
Well, first of all, I'd like to lay claim to victory of this podcast that I have the best hair on this podcast. I'd like to lay claim to that right now.
You guys are wearing their hats.
No question about that.
Well done, Eddie.
I'm going to take claim to having the best double chin too. So that's another story. I would say Jammer. I would say Jason Statham. Is that a good? Is that a good? He's got the look and the suave look and the physique. The physique. Paulie. I don't know. What do you think, Jammer? Who do you think would play Paulie?
I'm thinking like a Robert De Niro.
Wow, that's high praise.
Yeah,
Thanks, brother. You need a great actor to get into that deep, smoldering, little persona that is Paul Day, or like, Paulie, who plays the other guys?
Oh, Eddie for sure. I'd say one of the Bridges brothers. I think it's Jeff Bridges, unbelievable actor. Yep, he's on. Been on a couple. Isn't he's on Ozarks? But he's been in a couple of Netflix things I've watched recently. And Jammer. That's a good question. Jammer. I'm looking here.
You want to know what my kids say?
Who?
Ed O'Neill.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Modern Family.
Married with children.
Yeah, I think it's more to do with the attitude than the looks.
There you go.
Hey,
I like to finish off the podcast with a relatively serious question, but I think everybody that I've talked to has a story that they would love to see created into a 30 for 30 around our league, around lacrosse, around kind of just the world that we live in and have lived in for a couple of decades together. What's your 30 for 30?
My 30 for 30 would be transitioning from the mill and I guess the PLPA to the NLL. And I was in Rochester with Steve Donner at the time. So I lived that, and we just won the championship in 97, and then in 98 became individual ownership, and we were only allowed 6 Canadians, and then these guys end up in Hamilton with a full team of 23 Canadians. I was like, who made the rules up for this league? Like, we just won, and we're not the best team in the league anymore. But I would say that transition from the MLL to the NLL, and obviously Paul and Gary had a big part in that, and the PLPA, and Steve Donner, and some guys that Eddie we worked with before. So that would be for me.
I think for me it would be, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think it would be the Les Bartley legacy in our league, and how he started, and how it's just grown, and the people. You look around the league. We did it one night with I've got Dan Ladouceur on my staff, and Sean Ferris. Both those people were in Toronto with us, and we started to go around the league, and it was just ridiculous, the number of people. So I think just the legacy of Les and how that's impacted our current league today, and it is going to impact it for a lot of years.
Yeah, I think that's I agree with that. Both you guys, awesome points. I think to spend an entire weekend filming what guys go through, whether they're living in the market or not living in the market or traveling, and even spend 2 or 3 weekends with guys, what they go through in their regular day jobs, and get on a plane or get on a bus, and if you're in Toronto, even go to practice on a Tuesday night or drive to Six Nations to practice. And I think what the players go through to fulfill their passion, I think would be an interesting story as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, certainly I've agreed they're all great stories, and a number of people that I've talked to have talked about a lot of these things, but the sacrifice that our guys make to play in the National Lacrosse League, and what they're able to do in comparison to kind of other professional athletes that play at the highest level of the game in the major leagues, Premier League soccer and all that fun stuff. I mean, I got to tell you, it's an odyssey. And that's why I think we joke and laugh about travel in the National Lacrosse League, because we do travel commercially, and anybody that travels a ton for business or pleasure that ultimately knows and understands what a commercial flight's like, and does it every weekend, and the ability to then get off a plane and go practice and be prepared to play your game. Man, these guys are playing at a pretty high level, and the product they put on the field, on the floor, is second to none, and I know most of the people that are going to watch this or listen to this are fans of our game anyway, and they know this already, but kudos to our players, and I know you guys have a great amount of respect for all of the guys in our league and what they do, and so look, to wrap up, I want to say thank you. You guys are certainly role models for me in this league, and I think every day about how we grow this game, and I look to my left and look to my right and realize that I've got amazing brethren in the game to help continue to cast the legacy, and you guys certainly set that fantastic example. So thank you for everything you're doing for the National Lacrosse League, and thank you for continuing to be there as rocks in this league, and guys that we all count on to bring really intelligent thought to the future of how we play. So thanks, fellas, for being on the show. I appreciate having you.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys.